Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Hello and welcome to Down with D&D. I'm Sean Merwin and I'm here with the one and the only Teos Alpha Stream Abadia. Welcome.
I don't know. I felt like I had to somehow.
Wow, that was that was either the world's either Zoom muted you for me or that was the world's worst scream.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I just figured I was going to be clipping, so I had to. I don't know. You know, look,
Yeah.
I wanted to bring some enthusiasm, but all I could think of was something that, from an audio perspective, would be bad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you can just picture a bearded Teos screaming, but not really screaming.
Right. That's kind of, Tombstone material. Screaming,
Yeah.
but not really screaming.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Tombstone, there are some Tombstone-ish feels going on with Icewind Dale in some of what we're going to cover today.
True.
But before we get to that, we are going to talk about some news. And we're going to start with industry news, which there has been a lot of recently. And we thought there might be more coming. And we were right. As Elisa Teague is now the senior producer leading the role-playing division for Renegade Game Studios, a growing RPG company that has been turning heads with big Kickstarters and big deals. So, Teos, do you want to talk us through this?
Yeah, I mean, you have worked with Elisa.
Sure have.
She is fantastic by all accounts. I have not worked with her, but everybody who I think is awesome keeps saying awesome things about Elisa. And she is known for doing amazing puzzle design, for writing RPG adventures, interactives, things like that. She's gotten her, it's just spread across all kinds of different RPG experiences. So she is someone absolutely that you'd see being picked for something like this. She's apparently also co-designed or to some extent worked with the upcoming Tasha's Cauldron of Everything book that everybody's heard about. She designed the Wardlings RPG for miniatures for WizKids, the kind of kid-friendly RPG line or minis line. And what's really interesting here to me is this is yet another kind of big hire by a place that's not necessarily known by everybody. And yet they've made some really big waves with the games they've already done. But even recently, they announced a deal with Hasbro. Right there, it makes you go, it doesn't Hasbro own Wizards? Don't they already have a role-playing game company? But Renegade has a deal with Hasbro to create new Power Ranger, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and My Little Pony RPGs and deck building games. And it sounds like both for each, maybe. They said that the Power Rangers RPG is going to come out first, but it sounds like all of them. Oh, and by the way, they're 5e compatible,
right?
Which is really interesting. And all of this is just super interesting. A really big company that is making big deals with Hasbro. This has to involve a lot of money. They are known for launching really slick, polished, successful Kickstarters, great marketing to their team. And they hire an awesome person. And this is just fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it is obviously, Alyssa is is an outstanding game designer, even board games.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's all over the board in terms of games and puzzles and design and an absolute steel trap mind. Elisa has. So that's not a surprise at all. The surprise is there's all these role-playing games coming out that Wizards of the Coast is not working on directly. Now, who knows indirectly, because I know that she's worked closely with Wizards, as you said, on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and many other projects. So it makes you wonder, at least it makes me wonder, what is Wizards of the Coast working on that they don't have the people to work on these things for Hasbro, since they are 5e not just RPGs, but deck building card games.
Yeah, in the olden days, like TSR, this would have very obviously have stayed inside of TSR, and you would have had, the names that we recognize from that era would have absolutely been the people to do this, right? They might have brought in some freelancers to help, but they would have been directing this and in charge of this project and had their hands in it. Their words would have been in it, right? And so it's very interesting to think of these really big properties that are critical to Hasbro, but I don't know that we're going to see any of the designers we know from the 5e team have their words in it.
Right.
Maybe not.
Yeah. It's an interesting development that I just don't have enough information on to make any judgments or make any predictions long term about the RPG industry and D&D specifically. But it's just an interesting piece in a puzzle that will hopefully become clearer, over the next few months and years.
Yeah. And it's another sign of how there are some companies out there that are entering the RPG space in a kind of possibly transformative way, with a really different look at how you launch things and how you treat it as a business. And they have the ability to kind of almost come in out of nowhere and operate at a very big scale.
Right. Yep. So that is an interesting development, which we will keep an eye on, both Renegade specifically and other big announcements in this area. In our Kickstarter area, we have a new product, a new Kickstarter up called Nazi Dracula Must Die, a Kickstarter by Anthony Joyce, Justice Arman, Sadie Lowry, and MT Black. It is, yes, that's a powerful group of designers who have succeeded grandly on the DM's Guild, and they are now taking their ideas to Kickstarter. So this is a campaign that is wrapped around the idea that Nazi magic and Nazi colossi are destroying the world and you must stop them. So it is a World War II era RPG that uses 5e rules as its base.
Yeah, it's super interesting, right? Albert Einstein recruits you. Baba Yaga is fighting the Nazis.
Right.
Well, Rasputin's going to be in there.
Right. Russian fighting the Nazis as well.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. There is, the Kickstarter contains setting information, 8 new subclasses, an adventure for level 5 characters to hunt down and kill Nazi Dracula in Transylvania, new equipment, magic spells, new creatures. Brian Patterson, D20 Monkey, does some awesome art. Rich Lescouflair, who we know from Adventures League and from other Wizards work, does the layout, graphic design. A ton of other designers are also working on this, and it is interesting for a lot of reasons. But I wanted to get your take first, Deus.
Well, this is, I think, one of 3 Kickstarters. We talked about 2 last week. It's at least the 3rd, but there have been some earlier forays where I think people who've been really successful in the DM's Guild are saying, I give 50% of my royalties to the DM's Guild, and that's cool. I'm making good money and all, but what if I test the waters on how Kickstarter works for me? And they're doing it in a very professional manner, a very high quality manner. So, when we look at what Adam Gregerson released, when we look at what Jeff Stevens released, when we look at this release by Anthony Joyce, MT Black, Justice, Sadie, these are, they're not holding back. This is not a tiny little thing they're creating. They're giving us a lot of creativity, beautiful art, beautiful layout. It's a lot what they're doing. And in this case, they're paying really well. They are putting their beliefs front and center. They're paying freelancers 20 cents a word, editors 10 cents a word. So they are really trying to account for their costs up front and be good about paying everybody that's working on the team. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is. And there have been, I don't want to say a glut of Kickstarters, but it seems like every day I'm turning around and there's another sort of 5e D&D-ish Kickstarter going up, and that sounds great.
Yep.
And one of the questions that comes to mind is the audience going to be there for it?
Right.
because there are people like you and I who buy everything, right? We back everything just because we want to support it, and we can support it, and we want this to do well. But is there going to be a time when the consumer base taps out and says, we can't even keep up with what Wizards is releasing? How can we do this? So that's one of the things that comes to mind.
Well, as a collector, I have to say that answer is no, and always is no. But I think it can be easier or harder to reach the people, but both the people who will buy everything or buy many things, and the new audience. And that's the hardest part is how do you tap into those different audiences so that you get the proper backing, right? So out of these 3 Kickstarters, one of them's funded several times over, one of them's halfway there, one of them's a third way there, though they all have different levels, and so it's not, you can't compare apples to apples. I think they'll all end up funding. But it isn't just easy, right? It's not just like launch a Kickstarter, sit back and make the money. You have to work hard, as in anything else, to make this get there. And I think that's why we see these people doing this, because these are folks who we know, we've seen time and time again, they'll put the hard work in to make it a good product.
Sure. And I'm a coward. I have thought many times about, I should do a Kickstarter, and I look at the work that would be involved in doing it right, and I question whether I have the stamina to do. I could do the writing. I could do the writing with my eyes closed. It's doing the marketing. It's doing, the due diligence on making sure, all the books get to where they're supposed to be. The logistics, all of that, is a whole different ball game than the DM's Guild. So. Kudos to everyone who's taking the leap and testing the market and doing great work like this product.
And they can use everybody's support, right? These are good folks who are trying to make it in this hobby, right? And I think basically everybody on these recent Kickstarters is trying to either make it it either is their full-time job, or they're trying to make it their full-time job. And so this is a worthy endeavor they're taking on, and they certainly appreciate your support.
Yep. We have more from Sly Flourish.
I do. I think this really ties into what we're talking about in 10 Towns. He wrote this piece, Thinking 2 Horizons Out. And it's something that I know he thinks about a lot. I've thought about a lot, which is, we'll do things like we'll bring out these cool looking dwarven forge setups, and then the party goes left. And Bill just sits on the side table there, and all right, the next session we get it out there ready next to us. Now they go somewhere else. Now they went right, but I thought they were going to go left this time. And so that idea of like, how do you plan not just for what's going to happen in today's game or whatever your next game is that you're running, but after that, where are they likely to head, and to think 2 horizons out, not just what the players see now, but what's just beyond that. And he comes up with various techniques on how to do that. And I thought this really applied to Rime, because there is this approach around the 10 towns and these starting quests, and DMs have to think not just about the town they're in right now with the party, but where are they likely to go after this. So you kind of have to think 2 horizons out in this adventure.
Yeah. And what that doesn't necessarily mean preparing 2 horizons out. It just means knowing what a not best possible, but the most reasonable path that the players might take based on the information you're presenting them. And when we talk about the 10 towns, I'm going to bring this up at least a couple of times, is while as a DM you might not think about it, a single word that you present to the characters may point them in a certain direction. Just by letting one detail slip, you could make it obvious that the next place they want to go is here, while that might not be where you are ready for them to go.
Yeah.
And so by thinking ahead, not only are you better prepared, but you can tailor what you say to make it less likely that they are going to turn left when you expect them to turn right.
And yet it will still feel natural to them, right?
Exactly. It's not a railroad in the pejorative sense of the word. It is just providing the information that leads to a more likely outcome.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that. I think that's a good skill to hone in this adventure of Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Oh, for sure. So we have minis with Teos.
I've been drowning in minis over here, which is really like, if you think of the Scrooge McDuck scenario, like that's what I would like to be. I'd like to be just in a pool full of minis.
Right, you're swimming around.
And WizKids has done their best to do that for me. WizKids and D&D have launched a store portal for D&D minis called dndmini.com. It's basically the same thing that you could get through the WizKids web store, but now it's filtered so you're seeing all of the D&D offerings. It's an easier to navigate site. I did not super love their old store, which is still their store, but on their site. So the web store now makes it easier to find what's current, what's new. If you want to see what huge, exciting dragons and things like that they have, it's all there. The web store price is the cover retail price. It's the same price you would see in your favorite local gaming store. So that's a choice you have to make, and it's hard to make in this era of COVID. But do you want to support WizKids directly? Do you want to, and your local gaming store gets nothing? Do you want to go to your local gaming store where it's sort of half and half? You can go to discount web retailers, and those might shave 10 to 20% off the price. But then those entities that you want to support are getting less. So it's worth checking and thinking through. Sometimes discount web retailers are not cheaper than a place like this. So, think it through and decide who you want to support. I think it's always important to be conscious around where your money is going, what you're doing. But they are trying to encourage you to do it, because they are offering, if you spend $100 on the store during this limited time offer, you get 3 Yeti Tyke special minis. So these are variants of the Yeti Tyke that's in their newest collectible set. These are little baby Yetis. They're very cute, and there are 3 of them in different poses, and you get them for free if you spend $100.
Okay, so as a non-mini collector,
what?
Yeah, I know. I will be flogged for this later. So if I go to dndmini.com, can I just type in ghoul and purchase ghouls from them directly?
Yeah, you should. Well, you're saying are they doing individual minis? I don't believe so. Okay. So they are not offering. So you would get it, because what they have is they have their unpainted series called Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures. So I just did that search, and I get the 2-pack of unpainted ghouls, because that is a product they offer. What you're not going to see is they've had 11, 12 ghouls so far, probably more like 8, in their various box sets. They are not reselling individual ones, but you will get you could buy a box of the collectible set that has ghouls, or you can buy these ghouls unpainted.
Okay, so if you wanted the painted ones, the best option is still
there you'd have to go to a discount store or eBay, something like that, to get that individual one, or go to your local game store where they have that display point. That one through your mask.
That one. Okay.
That one.
That one right
Give
there.
me the little one.
I am your customer.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So, Birds of Paradise, a DM's Guild release providing aarakocra and kenku subraces. I did notice this as I was browsing through the DM's Guild this morning.
Yeah, I'm the proud owner of
But you
this.
picked it up. Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It is it's so pretty. It's pretty, sometimes you're like, this just looks good, but this is creatively gorgeous. You look at it and you go, wow. I'm so into the way this thing is designed. It's beautiful layout. The art of these various kenku and aarakocra. So, just to be clear, so this is a book containing subraces, so that you can make characters from one of these flying species, or flying aarakocra or kenku species. And they all have really interesting twists and turns based on real and imaginary creatures. A lot of creativity. They're really fun. Immediately makes me want to start a campaign where everybody's avian. It's great. But you also would want to take the art from any one of these and be like, here's my character, because it's such great art. Nice. This has been a bit of a sleeper, I feel like, this Birds of Paradise product. I highly recommend folks pick this up. It's really gorgeous.
All right. You can find that on the DM's Guild. Just search Birds of Paradise. The Eberron Oracle of War campaign is now heading into Tier 3. So if you were one of those people who said, "What? You're only releasing one adventure a month? That will take forever." We're halfway to forever. All of the tier 1 and tier 2 core adventures are up. There is a core tier 1 epic adventure, and hopefully coming soon will be a tier 2 epic adventure. So as soon as that drops, then you will have pretty much all of the content that is going to be released for tiers 1 and 2 of Oracle of War. So if you've been waiting, saying I'm going to run it once it gets into it, we're into it.
We're into it.
So the EB10 was the final core storyline adventure, Judgment of Iron by Richard Green, and it got a great review from the people that previewed it at conventions that were playing it. So you can check it out. It is the third of a great trilogy of adventures set in the Mornland as you do battle with the Lord of Blades and his minions.
I have been loving this campaign. The Eberron Oracle of War is really one of my all-time favorite organized play campaigns. And you may think like, well, I don't do organized play, great, but maybe you have thought to yourself, I wish I had one place I could go to and get like a cool Eberron campaign that adventure by adventure would walk me through how to portray the flavor of Eberron and capture that and give my players and me a really cool Eberron story. Because I don't know, otherwise I have to like dissect source books and endlessly figure out what Eberron is, and I don't know where to look. This is where you can look. Like, you get these 10 adventures, and each one is walking you through facets of life of Eberron, capturing that really well. And so I highly recommend this. I love it when an organized play campaign can just distill a setting down, and I think it does so very well here. So this next
Will
one,
did a great...
Richard Green. I mean, you guys have had amazing authors for this series. Great stuff.
Yeah, and another point. Well, thank you first of all. Will Doyle has done a great job putting this storyline together and finding great authors to fill it in. So that's been helpful. But one of the things we tried to do is make this an organized play campaign for people that don't like organized play campaigns. The rules are not overly, the character creation rules are not overly complex. The rules for getting rewards for your characters are not overly complex. We've tried to distill it down so it's very simple. It can be a campaign that you can run at home just as easily as you can run, in public or online publicly. So it's a good on-ramp for people that want to experiment with organized play but don't want to dive deep into the deep well,
right?
That is the Forgotten Realms campaign right now.
Yeah, and so, I played this at conventions physically back when that was the thing. Remember those days?
Mm-hmm. I remember that. Well, not really.
And I've also been running this and sometimes playing. Sometimes we take turns, but I've been running this for a group of friends from the DC area, just running it online. And I've experimented with, sometimes I use Roll20, sometimes it's just Zoom, but it's very easy. So organized play sometimes just feels like a home campaign. But you can use those same rules and then just, take the adventure, run it online for your friends.
Yep. And last but not least for our news, talk to me, Teos, about Keith Baker's Patreon-like Eberron campaign.
Yeah, more Eberron. So Keith Baker sort of famously did a thing back, I don't know, a long time ago. I think he called it Have Dice Will Travel. And he would say, like, I forget the exact deal, but it was something like, you give me room and board and I will run a game for you. Mm-hmm. And you can literally get Keith Baker to be running a game for your team. And he's kind of doing something like that now. He's got a Patreon where he is going to be running an online Eberron campaign. And if you are supporting at the $6 a month level, you might get picked randomly to be one of 5 people that plays in each session. And he'll just kind of randomly pick 5 and they'll get to play. And even when they're not playing, they get to help shape the campaign and choose various options and things like that. So this seems like a really neat experiment. Keith's a fantastic DM, wonderful person. So really worth checking out if you are at all a Keith Baker fan or an Eberron fan, and you should be. We'll have the link in the show notes.
There you go. Yes, I remember when he was doing that because I got a text from a friend in Buffalo who said, I can't believe it. Keith Baker's on my couch right now. I'm like, okay, that's dedication. I got to tip my hat to Keith, for getting out there. And, we always say designers need to get out and run their own games and run games for the public. And Keith took it to the nth degree right there, right? He was just like, yeah, I'm in your house running games for you.
Yeah.
So
unafraid, right? But I bet he learned so much from those playing in so many, and I don't think it was just in the US. I think he
overseas
yeah,
too,
so it's just amazing.
Yep. Now we get to our main topic today, which is our continuing look at Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. We've carefully weaved our way through the Spine of the World Mountains, and now we are approaching, finally, the 10 towns. So you wanted to talk about some lore you should know?
Yeah, if folks ever catch the official D&D podcast, they do a segment called Lore You Should Know. It's often Chris Perkins, sometimes others, who will speak to Greg Tito about some aspect of Forgotten Realms or D&D lore. And they did a lore you should know on the 10 towns. And they also did one on the Reghed Nomads. So I put both those links in here because I thought they were pretty useful for anyone who's running this adventure.
Yep. Great background information there, as always. But what we're going to talk about is not background anymore. We are going to talk about the actual adventure where the rubber meets the very icy road here in Icewind Dale. The chapter or the section that starts dealing with the encounters and the action that the players and their characters will undertake is called Cold Open. And this is how the book tells you as the DM to get your characters involved in the story.
Yeah, and it's an interesting premise, right? So the way this begins is a lot of times in adventure, you show up and you're like, something has just started happening and you learn about it. But here, your characters know more than the players do. The first thing you do is tell your players that their characters know that there is perpetual darkness in Icewind Dale, and that this area is unusually cold, and that the rumors are that the Frost Maiden, Oriel, has caused some magical effect, just throwing this place into this darkness. And that's been going on for some time. And they're not there necessarily to do anything about it. I mean, maybe they decided to, but they're here for you tell me why you're in Icewind Dale.
Right. And that secrets section that we've talked about maybe a couple episodes ago is one way that you can give your characters something to role play and something to keep in the back of their minds as to why they are in Icewind Dale.
Yeah, it's also interesting that the assumption of the adventure is that the players basically know the map of the area. They know where what the 10 towns are called, where they are, and maybe something even about them. They could have been here around in this area for some time. I think that's very interesting as well. Anytime you have a difference between player and character, I find that very interesting that the adventure has chosen that.
So the text tells you pick a town to start in and then decide which quest you're going to run. Now, there are 2 quests that can essentially happen anywhere. And then each town has its own quest. So you as the DM have to decide A, what town you want to start in, and then B, what quest you want to introduce. And this is where we were talking earlier about being careful with what you say, because if you only want to start a town quest, you don't want to introduce any of these other quests, because then you are leaving open any direction for the characters to go, including, if you use rumors, going to any of the other towns.
Right.
So as the DM, first thing you want to do is figure out what you want to do.
Yeah. And what I find interesting here is you've got 10 towns. It's a lot of pages. It's a lot of material because you have material that covers each town. And then you have material that covers the quest, and sometimes even little extra quests of each town. And so it's not as simple as if, they decide to go to Cardinival. Oh, quick, I'll just flip there, because Cardinival actually has a Kyre in it. And it's an enormous thing to read through. And so there is that question. It's a hard thing for a new DM to kind of go like, all right, how do I balance this? What do I even want to start with? And so how would you tackle that?
Yeah. And I think the answer is tackle it like the book sort of lays out, which is use these 2 smaller starting quests first. This gets you, first of all, it gets the characters a level quickly. So you don't have to worry about that first level, oh, I critted you and killed you accidentally problem that first level has. But then it also lets you ease into running a town. Personally, I would pick one of the smaller towns first, just so there's less to prepare, because some players are going to walk into town and they're looking for the quest. Some players walk into town and they want to know what every building is. And for an experienced DM, that's hard, especially if you're running without a lot of prep. When they start asking, okay, how many taverns are there? Which tavern should I go to? Who's the mayor? Who's the speaker? Who's in charge? Where can I buy this? Where can I buy that? All of that stuff can pile up and be intimidating for even an experienced DM. So I would start in one of the smaller towns, and I would start with one of these short opening quests.
So one thing about the open quests, so there are these 2 opening quests that you can do, Cold-Hearted Killer or Nature Spirits. One of them is more combat oriented, though it's very heavily investigative at first. And another one is really very low chance of combat. You're doing it wrong if you do combat. And both of them, however, start with the premise of it cannot be solved in the first town you're in. So they will involve going to another town. And there's some interesting aspects here, but just stopping on at that point. So it's almost like, you're going to be in a town. That town has a quest, and you've got this overarching quest, but it'll take you to another town, and maybe possibly to several. And I think that's a little hard to gauge. I like your idea of starting in a small town, because that would be really easy prep. There are 2 towns that I am drawn to as to where I would start. One is East Haven, because it has a number of quests going on in it.
True.
And so if you wanted to prep, you have to prep a little more, but you will then be prepping, because it almost has like extra mini quests in it that actually aren't quests, so you don't level from them, which is interesting. But it has these mini quests, and so as a result, you can spend a lot of time here. So you do a little extra prep up front, but now you can kind of just get your ground under you, right? Like lay down a solid foundation of this town, maybe call it a bit like home for them. The other one I really like is Goodmead. Goodmead is one where the speaker has been killed, and the quest is around sort of avenging them. But then there is also an election that's going on, and one of the people there is bad. So you could also make this their home base, and one of them could even run for speaker.
True.
And so if you want to have a stake in 10 towns, this could be a way like, this is your town. So that's probably the way that I would play it, but there's certainly a ton of flexibility here, right? I wonder if there's too much.
It's hard to say. Through this whole review that I did, Teos and I will go through all of the 10 towns, because we went through all of the 10 towns. But what really struck me as I went through all of this was how conflicted I was about whether this was the best way to present it. Because part of me would say no, and then part of me would say yes, obviously this is how you needed to do this. There should have been more. No, there should have been less. There should have been, there should have been a solid quest. No, there should have just been this hint at a quest. They should have spelled it out. No, they should have just left it as is to let the DM do with it what they want. I was just so conflicted that I found myself arguing with myself constantly.
Yeah, me too.
As I was typing out notes, which really just comes back to the point that this game that we play is so complex in a good way. It can be played in so many different ways. It can be prepared in so many different ways. It has a draw for so many different types of players and so many different types of creativity that there is no one right way to present it, but there are a lot of wrong ways. And so as we evaluate these things and say, I wouldn't have done that, it's not saying that what they did was wrong. It's just for the frame of mind we were in at the time we were reading,
mm-hmm.
and at the focus we had at the time we were reading, maybe there was a better way to do it.
Or even that it just stuck in our minds, right? Or caused a reaction,
right.
But it's not necessarily nothing means that you're not going to have fun, right? That's the thing.
Right.
D&D is so flexible.
Right. And, I found myself saying, boy, I would love to run this, and then I would hate to run this, right? When I had time to prepare and think, when I was really in a creative mood, I would love to run this. If I was pressed for time, or if the party were a group that went off and did random wild things that I didn't expect, I would both love and hate to run this.
Yeah.
So, it's just this, it tells me that there is a lot there, which is great, because you want a lot there to work with as the DM.
At the highest level, when I read this whole kind of chapter one, one of the things I really love is each town has a thing to do. So what's not going to happen is you're not going to go to a town and be bored or, kicking snowballs around, because they will have a thing to do. And so each session of play, you should have a good time. And then you can give them some rumor and they can move on. So you're not going to, like worst comes to worst, you're going to have really fun D&D. Right. You're going to have a great time at a town. And you're going to go to the next town for your next session. Or spend a couple of sessions in town. Like, it's not going to be a problem. But what I do think as a sort of designer, DM, I think to myself, I love it when an adventure is always progressing me towards some goal. I'm fighting giants, I'm stopping a death curse, I'm doing something. And it's very hard to do that. That's why both the adventures I just named are not perfect. But in this one, it's sort of like, we know there's this horrible effect of an endless winter, and nothing is taking us towards really resolving it at this stage. We're just merely kind of doing these minor tasks, and I could see a lot of players that might get a little antsy as to, isn't there some hint of how I can? Nope, none of us have any info for you, sorry, but hey, you know what, could you go handle this smaller quest?
And if you do have that sort of smaller quest feel that doesn't lead you obviously toward the main plots of the adventure, you still want to show, you can still entertain the players by showing the effects of what's going on. Because of plot A, B, or C, this thing is happening. And we do get that just slightly hinted at in some of the quests. But for the most part, this could be happening anywhere in any Arctic setting without this Rime of the Frostmaiden, without the other plots that are going to end up becoming important. It doesn't tie into them, or even just hint at, this is the result of these things.
Yeah, and it's unusual in that sense, in that the hand of Auriel is not directly felt. Like in a lot of these adventures, right, you are fighting the agents of the big bad and sort of working your way through increasingly stronger agents of the big bad. But that's not the case here. We're working more like on the, she's almost like a natural force, right, that has done this, and we have no information on how to deal with that. So we're just dealing with the other things that have resulted because of this extreme cold, is more than anything else that's going on.
Right. Yeah. So it kind of ties in, but it doesn't. And you do get the feel slightly that it's just, we're doing this to level
A little bit.
and then
Yeah.
and then once we get to the correct level, we'll really start in on the plot of the adventure, so we can start creating our stories. And it's not terrible. It just, maybe you as the DM need to weave in a little bit more of that overarching plot in some way to make the players feel it more.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Do we have time to go over these 2 starting quests?
I think we do.
Cool. Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, why don't we talk about Cold-Hearted Killer first? So Cold-Hearted Killer is one of the 2 starting quests that they suggest. And this is more along the lines of a combat quest. But it doesn't happen all at once. It plays out over time. This can happen in any town. But you are introduced to Lean Trollbane, a retired dwarf bounty hunter who believes that there is a serial killer on the loose. She is a little bit too old. She's already done her time as an adventurer, so she wants the heroes to investigate. And she has a specific suspect in mind. He works for a traveling merchant company, so any town could host this merchant company when the characters decide to investigate. Overall, it is fairly straightforward. The suspect is, in fact, the killer, so there's no sort of plot twist there. But you still do need to have the characters do their due diligence in finding out, the who, what, where, when, and why. Well, actually, they know the who, so the where, when, and why of why these murders take place.
Yeah, I find all the adventures in this book actually do a fairly good job of sort of giving you those pieces that characters need to feel good about in action. And I think there's some good, they can find good evidence here, and then there are a number of ways to get rewarding information that confirms this. I thought that was all really done very well. So an interesting thing, right, is that the suspect can't be in the original town where you get this quest.
Right.
And then then it's like, well, they could be anywhere because they're a traveling merchant company.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically you could roll, although you could also just choose as DM. But then they also can ask around and figure out what the merchant company's schedule is. So they could even hit it in the second town. And one thing that's important, and it's created a lot of conversation back a couple weeks ago, is the final fight is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bandit captain, 4 bandits, and this CR3 guilty person.
Yep.
That's a lot to handle. So you better not be level 1. And the intention is, whatever town you started in, you will do that town's starting quest. So now you're not first level, you're second.
Yep.
And then maybe you've traveled some, so you probably, maybe you even do the second town's quest. Oh, now you're, level 3-ish or something like that. And then you face off against this and you have a chance at it. But it's worth thinking about very carefully about your character's strength. And you may need to withhold leads, or, oh yeah, they did come to this town, but you just missed them, right? Or do whatever you need to do to make this reasonable for your party, depending on how strong they are tactically and just what level they are.
Right. The other option is to make sure that the players and their characters understand that they are walking into a pretty nasty hornet's nest if they just do a front-on attack on this group. They should understand that the killer will be assisted by his friends unless he can be drawn away somehow.
Yeah.
Or if somehow you can reason with other people to help you, or some other way, because otherwise it is for a first level party, especially if you only maybe 4 or 5 characters, it's not going to go well.
And there's some guidance here, which is good. I wish there was a bit more, because especially for new DMs, even long-standing DMs, sometimes we get into this trap where we think like, well, the fun is the hard fight, but it's usually even more fun if you drop a small hint that says what you're talking about, right? That you don't want to face these head on, and then see your players come up with whatever ridiculous plan they will come up with to separate these groups, right? That right there is probably going to be 90% of your fun for this quest, is in how they would approach separating everybody out and trying to handle it. And it's going to feel probably super rewarding to them if it goes off well, right? If they're able to take a bandit down or two, or the captain, or just the one guy, that is super rewarding play, and I think could use a little more emphasis here.
Right. And if you go the investigation route, the characters can figure all of this out, figure out exactly who he will be targeting next, and then do the old thing that you see on the police procedurals, right? The assassin breaks into the house and the party's there waiting for him, right? Because that makes them feel super cool, as well as makes it a fight that maybe they have a better chance of winning.
And do you want to talk about how cool this villain is?
Oh yeah,
because he's got a really neat story. He's not just some evil person who decided to kill off people. He has he's been possessed by a winter spirit.
Yep. So there are people, if you want the plot, there are people who are being involved in these towns that have human sacrifices to Oriel. And some people are paying their way out of the lottery so they cannot be chosen. And that upsets Oriel. So Oriel possesses the killer and sends him to seek vengeance on those who are escaping their rightful place in these lotteries. So that's the one reason to keep this human sacrifice
that's true.
Thing, because without that, this becomes less of a dramatic story and reason for his killing.
It's really neat. There's a lot here that makes this quest really fun when you defeat him. He wields weapons made of ice that he can conjure. So there's that's a nice piece that kind of, again, no direct link to Oriel that they can truly use, but it's her influence is felt here and seen. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and so when you do DM it and your players are fighting this assassin serial killer, play up those aspects, because that does speak to the larger overall picture of what Oriel is doing in this area at this time. And, having his eyes glow blue and having weapons just appear in his hands made of ice, having his regeneration happen because of the cold, makes it it makes him a really even harder combat, but it brings home that point that there is a very supernatural aspect to what's happening here.
Yeah, this guy's no joke. Cold regen of 5 hit points at the start of his turn, attacks twice for an average of 12 or 13 damage with each hit. 75 hit points.
At first level, that's two characters around.
Yeah. Even if you're facing him at second, like you want to give this some time, and you definitely don't want him plus a bandit captain plus however many bandits it was.
Yep. So again, make it clear, make it a test of intelligence. Let the players and their characters know these people know their way around swords. Probably even more than you.
And you can have a lot of fun with this adventure, right? If you visit the scene of a crime, if you can, they get to a town a little late, but you can visit the scene of one of the murders, and you could have some really good times with this quest if you spend some time thinking through how to let it play out. Could give them some opportunities for the players to be creative. This could be great.
Yeah, and this is good practice for a DM, because most adventures are like that, right? Most adventures, even the most well-written runs, are better for your work on it as the DM to perfect it to your party's particular tastes and their particular play styles. So I like the fact that it's such a great story. It's such a great investigation that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that it gives the DM the tools to work with it even more.
Yeah.
The second starting quest is a little less bloody, I hope.
A lot less bloody. Yeah, you're doing it wrong if you do it bloody.
Yes. So this is the non-combat quest where a half-elf asks your help in locating chwingas, which are nature spirits, but on the elemental side of the scale rather than being an animal, say. She gives the party a lantern for tracking elementals and asks them to go bring some chwingas home for her. And things can either go very smoothly from there or perhaps maybe not.
Yeah, and so you have a 25% chance of any town having a chwinga, but not in whatever town you meet Danica Greysteel's town one where you start. Again, can't do it there, so you go to another town, 25% chance. If you are in a town where this can happen and you're asking around, you'll run into a person that's complaining that their home is cursed. Mm-hmm. And you can go in and sort of interact with the chwingas. You can have a pantomime tea party, all sorts of kind of fun situation like that. And if you do this successfully, the chwinga is then going to follow whatever character interacted with it. Now, one interesting thing about that is that, you could potentially get a chwinga killed off if you go into doing some kind of quest or whatever. And I'm not entirely sure exactly how this really, I know what the adventure is sort of intending, but to me, when I think through how this will play out, like the chwinga is going to follow you for 10 days. But your job is to sort of take it to Danica, who hired you, and she's going to capture it. Now, I'm guessing that means she takes it from you. Does that mean you're not going to get the reward the chwinga would bestow from you at the end of the 10 days that it follows you?
Yeah, that's something that you need as the DM to decide ahead of time, because these chwingas are kind of fun-loving, trickstery sorts of things. They want you to play with them, and what you're doing is you're kidnapping one.
Yeah, it's not clear what Danica really wants to do with these, and it's a little,
that's the other thing. That's the other thing is, what are her intentions? And I don't know. She's a scholar,
lawful neutral,
and it says she wants to study them up close. That could mean a lot of different things, right? That could be like Dr. Frankenstein studying up close. It could be, she just wants to play with them. It's hard to tell.
I think this is perfect fun for a DM, right? Where you have to answer this question depending on your style, right? Maybe you're gonna have it that if they hand over this chwinga, Danica is gonna reward them, and then she's gonna go off and do some horrible thing with these things, and you're gonna face off against her later.
Yeah,
and her chwinga, tainted, corrupted chwinga army or something.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is something that I'm cool with the adventure not saying exactly what she's going to do, but the adventure needs to say for the new DM, hey, you decide what she's going to do. Here are a variety of options. And if they had added that, I would have gone, this was great, because you can have some fun role playing, cute little chwingas and characters doing silly things to get them on their side, all of that.
And at the easiest level, right, is you could just simply have it that when the chwinga meets Danica is super nice to it. The chwinga likes Danica, and the chwinga rewards you for introducing you to this super fascinating person that really loves to study them, right? Like it could all be peaches if you want it to be that way. And then it all works out. That's the simplest way. But you could also take it darker, or it could be a really tough decision. Like the chwinga's like, I'm supposed to go with this person? Why?
Yeah, why can't I stay with you?
Right.
It could be a little bit soul tugging.
Yeah.
Tugging on the old heartstrings. You know what? One thing I would add, and this is just me, I would have the chwingas near a small piece of Chardolin, but have them like shy away from it, like it's a horrible thing that they want nothing to do with, just to introduce the concept of Chardolin, what it is, and how these nature spirits don't like it at all.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just to again having these encounters do double duty.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
There's the encounter itself, then there's tying it to something larger. Even throwing in that small detail keeps at the front of their minds for the players and their characters that there's other stuff going on other than this chwinga tea party I'm having.
Yeah, and maybe that's even why the chwinga is drawn to the particular home where it quote unquote haunts, is maybe it's trying to actually like figure out how to remove a tool that has a fleck of it in its metal or something like that.
Right. Yep. So those were the 2 starting quests. Next time we will delve into each of the 10 towns as well as the quests that those towns deliver. Anything you want to say about these starting quests before we sign off?
No, I think it's fascinating design. I think this is great. This is fun. I'm excited to run this someday for sure.
Awesome. So with that, we will say to all of our listeners, you out there in D&D world, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us, to let us talk D&D at you for a bit. If you would like to support us, you can do so on Patreon by going to patreon.com/MMP. And for even $1 a month, you can make sure we keep the lights on here and get some extras from all 3 of the shows that are served by the Patreon: Misdirected Mark Podcast and Pandas Talking Games. So, Teos, where can people find you on the social medias?
I am at AlphaStream on Twitter, and my blog is alphastream.org.
You can find me on Twitter at Sean Merwin, or you can go to the forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com to leave us your thoughts on things we're talking about, deliver us any news that we should be covering, or just let us know how we're doing. Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. So, Mr. Abadia, what are we going to do now?
We're going to face off against some chwingas to prevent murders.
Or be murdered by chwingas.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?